It's a privilege and an honor to be here and to discuss this topic that has huge ramifications for not just the broadcast media, but consumers in general as well, right? So I started working in 1997, and the world has changed a lot in 27 years, and advertising has changed even more. So when I started working, digital was less than 1% of all advertising. In fact, I always gravitated, I don't know if this is the drill, to check that we were watching the safety video, right? Yeah. So when I started working, digital was less than 1% of advertising. I thought of myself as some kind of evangelist for digital in the wilderness. Uh, Back then, we would tell people why you need to do digital. There were very few people practicing it. It was less than 1% in India. I managed to be part of that and excitement even after the dot-com crash. But today, depending on which estimates you look at, and I've taken the estimate of one of the leading media agencies in Malaysia, digital is expected to be 74% of all advertising spend, right? This is in terms of ringgit spent on advertising. Anything that's 74% is a bit scary, right? That's a majority of a majority, right? So what is the implication of this is that if one set of mediums is so big, and if you go by further estimates, 80 to 90% of that 74% is spent on platforms owned outside Malaysia, which is Google, Facebook, TikTok. That is a serious number and a serious spend. So, and Shamsul shared some numbers. I'm just sharing a few charts as well. ADEX jumped in the pandemic because people were stuck at home, and advertisers realized that and said, hey, they're stuck at home, they're going to be watching TV, let me advertise there. So you can see that jump, which was almost 24%, was significant. But after that, total advertising spend has stagnated somewhat, right? It's plateaued at about 15 billion. This is not the real spend. This is the nominal spend based on card rates and estimation. So actually the real spend is significantly lower than this. But 2024, first half at least, looks like we are slightly lower than last year, right? TV addicts now, looking at TV addicts, that's the jump that Anjik Shamsul was talking about. And then after that you see it's fallen a bit, and this year we are down 5% for the first half of the year, right? On its own, 5% is not a scary number, but it's the direction and the trajectory and the 74% of digital that is very scary. So what I've done on this slide is split pay TV versus free-to-air television ad spends. And you can see from this that pay TV is down by 17% first half to first half, while free-to-air TV is actually up, right? Again, these are numbers that media agencies compute looking at tools from Nielsen, Kantar, and so on. But these numbers are still inflated versus actual spend, right? So the actual situation may be even more severe for broadcasters. And I just split that up again to look at pay TV separately. You can see the direction of the charts, and free-to-air, which so far is kind of holding its ground, but it's not growing definitely, right? It's just about holding its ground. Then we used Nielsen. So in Malaysia right now we have different softwares for different broadcasters. So Nielsen has always been the one used to refer to for free-to-air television ad spend. We can see from this chart that if you look at 2023 or 2024 so far, 6 out of the top 10 advertisers are government-related, government agencies or government ministries, right? Both for 23 and 24. The private sector has started, at least it's not in the top 10 so much, and it started shifting away, right? You can also see some advertisers who were big in previous years are not there in 2024. For instance, Bayersdorf, which has been there almost every year in the top 10, is not there now in 2024. And even other brands have come down in some way, right? And when we go to pay TV, we can see players like Unilever, Maxis, KFC, Bayersdorf have reduced spends. So there are others who've come in, and you can see from this chart that the private sector counts among all the top advertisers for pay TV, which is mainly Astro, right? But you can see a changing profile here as well. And people like Unilever, who spent 200-300 million in the past, 500 million in 2019, are now at 130 million 8 months into the year. So definitely they are looking elsewhere, or their money is going elsewhere, or they may be just cutting back their ad spend. At the same time, Procter & Gamble remains a top advertiser across all the years. So if you ask me, it seems like the private sector, different companies may be facing different business challenges and adopting different views of how they look at pay TV as well. But what do these shifts mean? What does 74% on digital mean? So I feel there are multiple implications, and we are very honored to have the guests that we do for the panel discussion. When we were having a brief pre-discussion, I felt I was already in a panel discussion because there's so many good points being raised, and I was like, wow, this is going to be fun. But what this shift means is you'll have connected consumers who get news in a 24-hour cycle on their phones as well as on television. They may also be misinformed. If you look at the US elections, there are a lot of fake AI-generated videos floating around. And when you get a video on your phone, your first instinct is it real? But a lot of people, maybe outside this room, believe it is real. And the credibility of the news source can really come into question, especially if mainstream broadcasters reduce in audience, right? This meeting and this talk would not have happened if we were talking about print, because there's not much to say there. Everything has a big squeeze on print. The medium, which used to be 30-40% of ad spend 10-15 years ago, is now virtually non-existent. And that's also because people don't need to subscribe. The pandemic killed the last part of that because they couldn't deliver newspapers to us. But there is a real change in advertising that has happened as mediums dwindle and certain mediums prosper. TV networks are under pressure to maintain revenues, in some cases to grow. If you're a big conglomerate who owned newspapers which made money and now they don't, you have even more expectations from television, and television needs to figure out how to grow. There's also a lack of eyeballs for credible media. So with the rise of digital, one of the things that becomes hardest is credible journalism and who pays for quality news. Today, everybody is an influencer. I think if you ask a 15-year-old kid what he wants to be, or he or she wants to be when they grow up, all my friends tell me, they say they want to be YouTubers, or they want to be chefs, or they want to be influencers. And they can all produce content and news and material that people see. And 48% of people get their news today from Facebook in Malaysia. So there is a lack of eyeballs for mediums that have content produced by credible journalists, by news teams that check the facts, that cover both aspects, and so on. And like I said earlier, it leads to a situation there can be a lot of naive trust and fake news as well, right? So all this is the climate that is facing us and facing broadcasters. And this is even before AI, right? AI is just going to make things even more accelerated. Uh, Today, less than 5% of all creative and media campaigns have AI in them, but the estimate is that within 5 to 7 years, about 50% of every campaign will have AI either powering the media choices or creative produced by AI, right? So that's going to lead to even more complications. And what are the implications of this shift? So I just put up a chart so that it looks like I did some homework. But the democratization of technology, which is happening, everyone is a content producer. Our phones can make movies now. Everybody is a broadcaster in a sense. So while that happens, the experience required goes down. And the amount of content that will be created goes up, right? So you don't have to be an expert or a domain knowledge person or even a power user. Everyone can produce, which means for brands, it's easier to go to market. I think in the UK now, TV networks are telling SME advertisers, I'll make ads for you using AI. Because production of an ad cost was a barrier to entry for many smaller companies or companies who didn't know how to do it well, right? Chat GPT can make an ad, small can compete with big, trend jacking is much easier and faster, things can be more data driven and produced more by tools and less by people, right? So what we expect is more noise, even more content out there, confusion, and a lot more streaming which is happening, right? And what we get less of is less silence, less time to think, less clarity, less single narrative. So for every narrative, there's a counter narrative. It becomes, which side of the political divide are you when you're telling me a story or telling me what happened? There's less advertising in a conventional sense. I have one or two clients who are saying, the future of advertising itself is in doubt, and they're looking at content and other ways to get messages across. And maybe less pay TV subscribers because people are either cutting the cord, using illegal boxes, or potentially just going to multiple streaming sources, right? Right, so I've painted what might be a gloomy picture for a Wednesday morning. So what should broadcasters do? And this is just my take, and later you'll hear from much more qualified people to talk about this. But what I feel is one of the key things is to embrace new technologies and approaches to drive brand salience for clients. So clients, advertisers are all about brands. I need my brand to be seen. I need to remind people that I'm there. I need them to remember me when they go shopping. There's a lot of data that shows that 30 to 40% of consumers can be switched within a grocery store. That means they walk in thinking of one brand, but they end up buying another brand. That's a huge number of people, right? So advertisers would like to keep finding ways to tell you to buy them. I'm just going to share a case study of this use of technology. My colleagues from Media Prima might be familiar with this. So on Fly FM, DJ Aina Sabrina, a virtual influencer who doesn't take MC or go on EL or negotiate her salary every 6 months. She came to being, and she was Malaysia's first ever radio DJ. So full marks to Media Prima for creating this person and backing the technology thought, which is now seems a lifetime ago, but it was just June last year, right? And Aina had a radio show on Fly FM 2 to 4 p.m. weekdays, and my client and ourselves decided to sponsor that. So first we were in a very conventional advertiser publisher relationship where we were sponsoring Aina's conversations and that show. But then we decided to take it to another level and make Aina actually the brand ambassador or brand influencer for Calpas's new flavor, which is chewy grape. And why did we take that step? We took that step because we felt there was a good fit between our target audience, which is young, 15 to 27 years old, tech savvy, wanting new things, easily bored, the people who skip YouTube ads and so on, right? So we felt their characteristics could be, we could customize Aina to match them. So Aina was given a backstory. She actually went to Japan to study. That's where she discovered Calpis. And so when she came back to Malaysia, she was really in love with our brand, which was very fortunate for us, right? And then at every opportunity, she would talk about Calpis. And on the show, she would talk about certain words from Japanese culture that she really liked, or concepts, and so on, right? And then we had a challenge because Aina existed basically in a two-dimensional form. She was an image. She had a great Instagram and so on, but she was a static image, right? And if we wanted to make her an ambassador, we felt she needs to have a moving image. She needs to be video format. She needs to appear in commercials and so on. So we worked within the constraints of the technologies and the basic DNA and look that she had. And then we tried to take her onto mass media platforms. So we took AI technology, but we created content for mass media, specifically for TV, for out of home, and so on. And because we could customize and tailor-make Aina, who is here obviously enjoying the Sakura season in Japan, we felt that this can cut through. So we combined both the advantages of AI technology as well as the reach, credibility, and larger than lifeness that mainstream media allows, right? And which is why I personally, somebody who spent 27 years in digital, do feel today that I'm actually now on the other side. I believe the pendulum has swung too far towards digital, and I think the credibility that mainstream media has needs to be maintained, and advertisers and brands and agencies need to focus and exploit that credibility. So I'll just play you a case study of Aina.
Beep, beep, beep. Beep, beep, beep. Karu. 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 Beep, beep, beep. Karu. Beep, beep, beep. Beep, 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 beep.
Moshi Moshi, it's Calpis with Aina. I've grown to be so in love with Japan. The people, the culture. The first AI ambassador for Calpis. Let me introduce a new delicious addition to the Calpis Chewy range. It's full of yummy grape flavor, and it has lots of chewy nata de coco. New Calpis Chewy Grape. Enjoy the refreshing taste anytime, all the time, anywhere, everywhere. Try it now. Listen to Calpis. Mushi Mushi guys, this is Aina. Join me weekdays from 2 to 4 p.m. as I play you the flyest music and cover all the latest trends and news.
Berita hangat, fenomena ungu yang menakjubkan dalam menguasai bandar Kuala Lumpur. Kini kita ke lokasi bersama Aina.
Hai, saya Aina,
Ka-
DJ AI Fly FM, melaporkan satu kejadian sedang berlaku di mana langit menjadi ungu. Agaknya, apa yang menyebabkan keajaiban luar biasa ini ya? Oh, rupanya disebabkan oleh ketibaan perisa baharu, Kalpis Chewy Anggur yang menyegarkan. Kalpis Chewy Anggur Baharu. Cubalah hari ini.
So I just achieved a bucket list item by standing in MCMC and talking about fake news. So thank you for that, right? Yeah. So we had a lot of fun with this campaign, a lot of challenges. I don't know if you were in downtown KL and you saw the storm of Nata de Coco and chewy grape that happened there, right? So this campaign has won a lot of awards because it's seen as possibly a new way forward. And who knows, maybe 5-10 years from now, most brands will be doing something like this. And some of the questions people have asked us is, why does she look so fake? Why does she doesn't look like a human being? And then we say, we blame Fly FM for creating her look like that, which we had to follow. But it's also within the constraints of the AI software and so on. Then people say, why does she talk with this American accent even though she went to Japan? Unfortunately, the software and the stuff that started it off was that, right? So there are constraints. It's not perfect, but it seems to be working to some extent. And this is just a bit of a sidebar. So this scary kind of video clip is actually created by AI. It's a software called Sora.ai, which can now make video much better than the ones that we were making, right? On the other side of AI, I would say we have to experiment with it, play with it, understand the laws, the ownership. Got to have policies, be curious, encourage staff, reward pioneers. So for my team which worked on this, it was play. They were, as the oldest and least knowledgeable person in that office, I just let them play and explore and figure this out. And whatever results we got, we tried to improve them. But if they didn't have that spirit of play, or if they couldn't figure it out or explore on their own, we would not be here, right? So the only good thing I think I did was say, guys, go have fun and explore this, right? And that's what I think we need to do with new technologies. It's about the mindset that broadcasters might have about new stuff. I have heard all this from the print guys in the past who were like, oh, digital is not that great, or there's no credibility, people won't believe it. But the bar for consumers is surprisingly low. There's a lot of research that shows consumers are happy to give up privacy if they get a freebie, right? So we worry about privacy, but the average consumer doesn't care too much about it if you're giving them something they value. So with stuff like that, we have to understand our audience and work with it, right? The second key point, I won't spend too long on this, but while I may be sharing tough times for Astro, there's also a lot of good stuff that they're doing. And one of those is Project High Council, which was original content that tackles real issues of bullying and what happens in boarding schools and so on. And it has been a phenomenal success. There's more series coming out, there's movies coming out based on this. And it's a content asset that they've created and they're now leveraging, right? So broadcasters need to be building content that is memorable, that connects. It takes a little extra effort, Because in the past, whatever you threw on TV, people would watch. That they had no choice. Today, they have so many choices. It's just about the content that hooks them in. And this is just an anonymous review which talks about how somebody finally saw the series everyone was talking about and how they were even moved by it, right? The third piece I want to talk about is building unmissable tentpoles or event television or actions that people want to watch on the TV. So, of course, TV3 has a 38-year-old property that just doesn't stop, that still has amazing ratings, that is still used by brands. And this is just an example of building good content and backing it forever, right? And there's a live event, there's a crescendo, it builds up to a finale. That kind of stuff doesn't go out of style. While consumers change at heart, they still want stories, they still want to support the musicians or singers or the underdog and so on, right? Human emotions have not changed that much while platforms and methods may have. And even Netflix realized they need to create live content, and so Chris Rock debuted his selective outrage comedy special, which is the first time he talked about the infamous slap he received from Will Smith, right? And this was a worldwide premiere and event that happened online on a streaming platform. I'm just going to close with a few home truths before we hear from people wiser than me. The first is that consumers and advertisers now have many choices, and broadcasters, we need to recognize this. For lack of a better word, let's not be like the print people who denied reality until it became too strong, right? So we need to recognize and adapt. The second, honestly, I feel there will be consolidation, there will be loss of revenues, there will be loss of jobs, and there needs to be reskilling before there is clarity and a new status quo, right? There is going to be some change, right? And the third is that the way we go forward is not a one-time change. I tell people in my office, I'm lucky, I just turned 50, I just have to work for another 5 or 7 years, hopefully. Whereas those in office in their 20s, their whole life is going to be something completely new that we've not imagined, right? So they need to accept, and those of us who still feel we're going to work for a few more years, need to accept that the future is extremely uncertain and we need to be agile. If you thought the future was more predictable 10 years ago, now it's definitely not, right? And therefore, what do we need to do? I feel we actually need to think of ourselves not as broadcasters, but think of ourselves as a streaming studio or as a Netflix. We are broadcasters who also have access to people's television sets, who have access to people's houses, who have access to people's data. But what are we doing with it? One of my favorite examples is, so because I work in media, I subscribe to all the channels on Astro. Because even though I don't understand Chinese or even Tamil, I just wanted to know what those channels are in case my client asks or somebody needs to know, right? So in the days when Astro used to send a magazine to my house every month, it used to be in Chinese, because they assumed that anybody who signed up for a Chinese channel will want a Chinese magazine. And in 20 years, they never asked me about it or improved their data. Again, I'm not picking on Astro. We have a very good relationship. But I've often said this even to you, in that you're not using the data you have and the access you have to people's houses, which today they actually try to do with the Ultra Box and so on, right? So broadcasters need to use the content and information and data they have. And then I decided, am I just talking through my hat, or is there any sense in this? So I asked the question to ChatGPT, what should broadcasters do? And ChatGPT is very good. They are working hard. So Then I looked at everything, and this is just the first page. There are 2 pages of this. It is all actually what Netflix does. So I was not that far off the mark. So you develop OTT, you use social media to hype up content, you simulcast, that means you have stuff on digital as well as on your broadcast platform. Interactivity, I don't know if you've seen on Netflix now, you can play games and do all kinds of stuff. You can engage influencers and content creators. You need to invest in personalization, targeted advertising. That's one piece that Netflix has not cracked yet. Their ad revenue has still not taken off. We keep waiting for it to come to Malaysia and launch, but it's not really here. Create original and on-demand content. That's something we've talked about, needs to be done. As broadcasters, you have some of the best archives out there. How can you use that and leverage that? There's a lot more, right? Niche content. So if you're a user of Netflix, or to be fair, even Astro, there's 11,000 titles on Astro. There's all kinds of stuff you can go and see if you just bother to click 2-3 times and find it. But Netflix makes that stuff easier to find, I would say, right now. But there is a huge amount of library of content, of acquisition that has been done that can be leveraged. I was having a chat with a client, and then Nini from Media Prima TV was there. And then the client said, the competing station has this program at this time, and how do we beat that rating? And Nini said, it's cool, we'll just put Anaconda on and we'll beat that rating, right? So there's tons of bullets and weapons that we have as broadcasters to throw at a problem, right? Short form is growing. So in China, there's a lot of short form TV content, or 3-minute dramas, 1-minute dramas that people are watching. Integrate commerce and shoppable TV, that's a huge opportunity. Invest in technology and innovation, which I think everybody realizes. We need to adapt advertising models. As a media agency, I would say, is the broadcaster's pricing for ads correct today? Basically, I'm trying to negotiate with you guys, but yeah, just raising that. We need to collaborate with digital giants. So in advertising, we have a term, frenemies. They are the enemy, but we also need to be friends. Is there something we can do there? Content syndication, and also mobile first, right? So these are all recipes that ChatGPT tells us to do. And actually, people like Netflix are doing probably 8 or 10 of these anyway. So this seems to be the right way to go, right? But now let's hear from the esteemed panel. And thank you so much for listening to me and giving me this platform.
Thank you, Mr. Sandip, for that enlightening presentation. Please have a seat as we transition to our first panel discussion.